Today, we have two distinguished guest speakers, presenters from CalHR. Glenna Wheeler is the Chief of the Office of Civil Rights at the California Department of Human Resources. She has 34 years of state service with over 20 years of experience in civil rights, equal opportunity employment. She is responsible for statewide program relating to equal employment opportunity, reasonable accommodation, upward mobility, workforce analysis, bilingual services, that's quite a bit, and the limited exam appointment program, or LEAP. She has also been a member of Association of California State Employees with Disabilities, or ACSED, and has been a court-appointed special advocate for foster children. She is very busy. Now, presenting with Glenna is Jerry Gibbins, who manages the policy administration of the LEAP. Jerry began that role in 2008 with the State Personnel Board and has continued that LEAP movement through 2012 and on with CalHR. With an extensive background, including vocational rehab counseling, Jerry brings many relevant credentials and much experience in supporting the independence of people with disabilities, with an emphasis in state civil service employment. So welcome both of you, Glenna and Jerry. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bobby. Good morning, everyone. Great to be with you, and happy holidays, SDAC members. So great to be with you. Thank you for this time to revisit the highlights of our presentation from October and allow plenty of time to answer questions. And knowing Glenna, you'll probably add a lot more valuable information that's valuable to this group and the membership. So, thank you again. I have a few opening remarks, if I may, Glenna. And first, I'd like to, go over the standard CalHR report out. This is about LEAP right now. So a couple of items. Currently, there are 43 LEAP exams on Cal Careers. That is the same number reported in October. Just a couple of pieces of movement that have happened. Two of the LEAP exam titles that were available in November, those were department-specific exams that EDD ran, Employment Development Department. So those expired at the end of November, but recently the CalHR Selection Division has added two more titles, Assistant and Associate Industrial Hygienist. So we're very pleased to see those titles and all the others that Selection Division has added recently. So the total number of LEAP hires so far this fiscal year is also 43. Popular number today. So to segue into our question and answer session today, first, thank you, Glenna, for joining. Really appreciate what you're about to add. So, but I just wanted to, go over some of the main points that we covered in October, and just real briefly. And as a side note, of course, thank you, SDAC, for recording the October presentation. I did have a chance to review that, and it helped recall the main points of that presentation. So we covered the LEAP process, the job examination period, the length. That LEAP is basically in two parts, the minimum qualifications portion taken through the calcareers.ca.gov website. The second portion is the job examination period. And we also provided information about the LEAP internship program. Plus, Glenna was kind enough to answer some questions about Assembly Bill 313, Let's see. And Glenna mentioned that our Office of Civil Rights has several programs, such as what Bobby outlined earlier. We have several programs that touch on issues related to people with disabilities, employees with disabilities in state service, customers of the state who happen to have disabilities. And so there may be a lot more to our office and our services that you might not be aware of. So thank you again for this opportunity. Glenna, I think at this point, it's probably best for me to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Certainly.
Just as Jerry mentioned, some of the things that we did not have the opportunity to get into with too much detail in our last presentation was some of the other things that we do related to people with disabilities in the Office of Civil Rights at CalHR. So as Jerry mentioned, I wanted to kind of add a little bit about that. Because it doesn't get a lot of publicity, and I wanted everyone to know kind of some of the background that does go on with our efforts. So one of our programs that was mentioned is the Workforce Analysis Program, and that program collects data from every single state department every year by June 1st. And one of the points of data collection is the number of people with disabilities at each department. And we get that information from the departments. We review that information. And departments that do not reach parity are required to set goals. So they actually are required to set a goal that shows that they will make some very affirmative efforts to hire more people with disabilities in the next year. And so there are about 13 questions, I believe, that departments have to answer very specifically if they need to set a goal. And then we compare that the next year with whether they were able to meet that goal or not, and what kind of things they did to meet that goal. Some of the things would include very focused advertising, perhaps to organizations that serve people with disabilities, certainly using the LEAP list and hiring from that. We have participated in very large job fairs to get more exposure out there about the LEAP program. So a variety of different things that, depending on the department and what the unique issues are at the department, sometimes it's location, it's vicinity, and there is not very much information about the fact that there's a state department located in a certain area. So people do not know that there's a LEAP program or that there are jobs available even in general. I know that that was true when I worked at Department of State Hospitals, and we had the majority of our thousands of employees were out scattered throughout California in very isolated geographical areas in some cases. The other thing is that we do have the disability survey on our website. That is part of our Equal Employment Opportunity Program, and it ties directly into the workforce analysis, because the survey is how departments find out who is working for them that may have a disability. And so in 2017, we actually completely re-engineered that survey to include more information, expand the definitions. We now collect more information on the type of disability so that we can analyze that data more. And we actually put out a policy that year that said that departments should survey their employees every year. And I know that for people who are involved in that survey, it can be quite a bit of work if you really make a robust campaign to put it out there and get those surveys back. So once a year might seem quite often. I know departments who regularly did it maybe every 5 years, every 3 years. And so we tried to make it as simple as possible by just putting that survey on our website. If anyone was here 20 years ago, you might remember that it used to be a little survey that came with your paycheck. And that was back in the days when they handed out paper paychecks. And when the department would do the survey, they'd hand it out with the paycheck, and you had to fill in the bubbles and put it in the envelope and send it to the state personnel board. So we've definitely come a long way since then, and no need to hand out paper surveys. We also incorporated into the policy that it's important to provide the survey to new employees when onboarding. because otherwise an employee might start and they are not in the system as having completed the survey for your department, and maybe you don't do it for 3 years. So now your numbers every year when you turn them in are not counting new employees who have not known or been told about the survey. So our policy has some really good information on it to help departments and their HR offices or wherever their onboarding is being done to make sure that they capture that data related to people with disabilities so that they can evaluate and see what they need to do better, what they need to do more. Jerry also mentioned AB 313, and so I wanted to bring that up again because I know that that is a big topic of conversation. One of the requirements of AB 313 is that CalHR put out a statewide reasonable accommodation policy. We have been working on that for the last few years. We've been working really closely with ACSED and Department of Rehabilitation and looking at all of the recommendations from the joint project that were provided in 2015 to make sure that we were covering all of the recommendations and that it would be a sound statewide policy. Certainly, departments are going to need to modify their policies in some instances to meet their unique needs. As I mentioned, things like geographical areas and processes, how things get done may be different from one department to another, especially because the duties are so different. Some departments have very typical office jobs while and I'm sorry to keep using myself as an example, but working at state hospitals for 18 years, the majority of the reasonable accommodations I saw were not related to office jobs. They were assisting patients, nurses, psychiatric technicians, people who dispensed medications. So some very unique and challenging types of things came up that was really important to do the reasonable accommodation properly and to utilize that interactive process. And so hopefully our statewide policy will cover as much as we can without delving into those unique aspects for each department. We have already started on it because, as I said, we were working on it, but we didn't have the statutory authority to put it out until AB 313 passed. So we are hoping to have that out in the first quarter of next year, providing the review process goes quickly, because we do have an extensive review process to ensure that any of our stakeholders, have had input, as well as our legal department and, of course, our government operations team. So once we have that all solidified, we will be rolling that out. So that's really exciting news. And then departments can take that and use that as their core and build on it for their individual needs. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that we have received input about our website and the way that our information is displayed and provided on the website, how user-friendly it is for people with disabilities or not unfriendly. And so we've really, really appreciated that. And my team at CalHR has gone through it and we've looked at each page, we've looked at each suggestion, and it's actually not only just our team, we've also had other areas like our CalCareers folks look at it, where you actually apply for jobs online. And because obviously that's important. That's the first place that you're starting, right? Is you're going to CalHR to look for a job. And then that takes you on to the LEAP information and other disability information. And so based on a lot of that feedback and those recommendations, we have been looking at how we can improve our website. We have a new communications director who's very eager to assist us with that, to make it as user-friendly as possible. And we do work on it regularly as it kind of evolves. Jerry knows because he's made some recent updates to our LEAP webpage, and our EEO manager has made quite a few updates regarding reasonable accommodation. So that'll be a continual work and effort as it evolves to to serve not only employees, but applicants who may be looking, to get a state job. And we do partner, of course, with Department of Rehabilitation on the LEAP process. So the first step on that is going to Department of Rehabilitation and getting certification from a counselor there. And so we want to make sure that's very clear on our website, that people know how to use that process. And I think that was kind of where we ended last time with our presentation, was talking about the LEAP process and whether there were any questions about how that works and anything new that's coming up. So Jerry, I'll hand it back to you. Just, I don't know if you have any of the questions already noted, or if we can, happy to just open it up to any questions anyone might have on LEAP or any of the programs that I mentioned.
Thank you, Glenna. So I believe we, answered briefly the questions that were, submitted to us, not submitted to us, but, that people organically came up with in the last session. I do recall that there were a couple of times that AB 313 was brought up. And, I see something in the chat. So I apologize. If we could just, sort of naturally open it up for questions on anything we've covered, any of our services, etc. I do see something in the chat.
Jerry, do you want to go ahead and read? Do you want me to read that for you?
Please.
Yeah. Okay. So Joyce asks, just confirming I understand. And did I hear that the statewide reasonable accommodation policy is being released in first quarter 2020? Thank you for repeating.
No problem. Yes, that is our goal. As I said, the review process is quite extensive. So because we've done so much work on it already, it really, we're just kind of dusting off what we'd already put into it, looking at it, making sure that it complies with AB 313, getting any additional input that we might need. But we had already really extensively had that vetted through our stakeholders, and we're very close to releasing it before. So since a couple years has passed since that was looked at, we do want to give it another look just to make sure that it's sound, and also to make sure that it works for departments that might not have a reasonable accommodation policy. I was a little bit resistant to accepting that there may be a department that doesn't have a reasonable accommodation policy, since those should have been in place for many years now. But we actually did a survey. That's how we kicked off our AB 313 implementation, was to survey our departments to make sure that they had a reasonable accommodation policy. And we actually did find a couple of very tiny departments or new departments that are working on it. So it wasn't, that they weren't going to have a policy, but they're actually developing it now. So we want to make sure that our policy is a good example for them and that they can use it in that effort too. So yes, my goal is the first quarter of 2022.
So I'm just going to jump in here. Will work because I don't see any questions there, and I will make sure. This is Susan from the SDAC's soon-to-be secretary, hopefully, and I have a question, more of a thought and a question. So I've been in state service I'm coming on 5 years now. Before I was in state service, I wanted to be in state service. It sounds like we had some unmute. There we go. I wanted to be in state service, but the first hurdle, of course, getting to state service is understanding how you apply for a job in state service, because it's very different than in the corporate world. So, and I have your page up right now, the LEAP program page at CalHR, and I'm reading them all like, so the first hurdle is to get a job, you have to understand the state process. And then if you're a person with a disability looking for a job, the second, and understanding the LEAP is that it's available to you and what it is and what the point of it is. And at 5 years in, I'm just starting to understand that. I was very happy to hear that you guys have where you're going to job fairs and you're explaining this, but have you thought process about that there's more than just the LEAP you have to make sure persons with disabilities that are not in state service understand, but they also have to understand the process of getting why the LEAP is important, because you have to understand how to get a state job, and then that LEAP is available to you to help you get a state job. You know what I'm saying? So the question is that a part of your conversations? Is that something that you guys are considering specifically when it comes to outreach and job fairs and presenting this to people outside of state service?
I see Glenna's head nodding yes, just like mine. Glenna, I'd like to make a comment there and perhaps then tag team with you. And that is, we have received input, feedback from stakeholders. And as Glenna mentioned, our team has looked at how we can improve just the message, the way information is presented, especially about the LEAP program being an optional pathway to state service for people with disabilities, certainly not a required pathway.
My second part of that, though, was about making sure that people understand if they see the LEAP and they're like, well, why do I? Because I, as a person with a disability, when I came to state service, I actually think I remember looking at this and going, what is the value to me? Why do I care about on-the-job testing? I'm trying to get an IT job. Either you're going to test me and I'm going to get it or I'm not. It doesn't matter if I have extra time. Now that I'm in state service, I understand why.
Yeah, those are really good points, Susan. And I think part of the challenge with that is LEAP is a 30-year-old program. And so it was designed just as an alternative type of examination process so that people with disabilities could prove that they could do the job on the job while actually working and completing the essential functions of the job, instead of having to have a lot of previous experience or go through a lengthy exam process. And so that has not evolved too much in the last 30 years, other than we have streamlined the what we used to call the darn it, Jerry, the online questions that we ask. They used to be readiness evaluation. I'm sorry, I don't know why that wouldn't come to me. But the readiness evaluation that we used to do online that just determined if you were ready to go into the workplace, certainly that has been overhauled in the last few years because, we don't ask people about how they're going to get to work or things like that anymore. And so now it's basically a minimum qualification check. And so things like that have evolved. However, the entire point of LEAP is that it is that alternative examination process. The thing that we don't say clearly, and I don't think anyone has quite figured out how to say clearly, like on things like our website, is that what the advantage of LEAP is that once you verify that you've met the MQs for the position and you're certified through Department of Rehabilitation as having a disability, you automatically get in rank 1 on the list. So that's the advantage.
Exactly.
Of LEAP,
I know
right?
that now after five years of service.
I know.
But
I'm sorry.
people coming in,
that's a tough one.
because how do you explain to them that that's very valuable?
Yeah,
and that'll make all the difference in you getting a chance at the job. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And that's what I say, because I've talked to so many people over the years who say, what's the value of LEAP? And if I'm talking and just having a conversation, it's really easy to say, well, you don't have to take the regular long exam and you get rank 1 on the list and, you're automatically reachable, which is different from some of these other very large lists where you might, never be reachable because they're so huge. And so it's interesting that the back end of how LEAP works was never put out as part of how it was marketed. And so that's something that I think that we'll look at. And because it is an exam, it's actually not in the control of the Office of Civil Rights, where Jerry and I work. We kind of do the functional program related pieces of it. Jerry does extensions and reductions and answers questions. And we help departments when the candidates are actually working in the job. But the exam itself, like the 47 that Jerry mentioned and the creation of those and changing the MQs, all of that is done in our selection division, our exam division. And there are some very strict rules about exams that not within our area of expertise. And so it really is going to require a collaboration if we want to market it differently to make sure that we do that properly and that it still meets the civil service rules that still apply. I think one thing that makes it unique is that way back in the 90s, we eliminated affirmative action for a lot of different categories. That was not eliminated for people with disabilities. That is the only protected category in statute that still has a requirement of affirmative action.
So Glenna and Jerry, do I hear there's an opportunity for DACs and SDAC to maybe send your office information about ways, if we have a perspective as a person with disability, to help with marketing, to help with like, these are thoughts? Because I mean, I have thoughts, of course.
Yes.
Oh,
and on that note, I love that you're answering these questions, but I want to give other people a chance because, you know, we'll talk again, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Scott says in the comments, aside from focused recruiting, what methods will CalHR recommend to departments to hire people with the side of?
Okay. Glenna, would you like to start us off on that?
So that's something that we're always talking about. And one of the major efforts that was put forward is the program for hiring people with developmental disabilities. And Jerry mentioned that as the internship program. And so that was something that was put forward a couple of years ago. It started on a pilot. It's now been extended. It was to expire in, I believe, January of 2020. It's now been extended through 2021. And I believe a new statute extends it through 2022. So that was a very specific effort. One of the things that is difficult, we work with departments all the time. Our workforce planning division works with departments to look at the analysis of their workforce and analyze their workforce, look at where they have gaps and where they need to make some specific efforts for diversity, not just for people with disabilities, but other types of diversity efforts that they can use when they look at what the makeup of their workforce is. And so we have a big list of, not we OCR, but our workforce planning unit and our recruitment person in selection has a list of specific organizations that can be contacted to find out if they would like some specific advertising there. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, the job fairs and things like that came a little bit to a halt during the pandemic. Obviously, I know that our exam unit tried to transfer those over into some different virtual events, but that does make it a little bit more challenging just because there weren't as many booths and job fairs out at the colleges, which is one of the places that we always used to go with those bigger job fairs. And so there aren't, one of the things that makes it a little bit challenging is that even people with disabilities who go through the LEAP program still have to be hired through the merit process. And so it's still a competitive process, whether you use LEAP or whether you go through, the other way to get a state job. And so marketing is really the primary way that we reach out. Focused recruitment is the primary way that we get that information out there, which is why it's important, obviously, that our website have some good information on it. And then that focused recruitment to reach out and find where those people with disabilities are so we can get that information to them if there's a better way to do that. But, and then these special programs like the internship, which we, sometimes, like I said, we pilot it to see if it works and see if it has significant impact. As we evaluated that program, we were talking with the governor's office very specifically about that program and things like the buddy program. And even the governor's office was familiar with things that they had worked with before that are not part of the state that they ran through us, to see if we could adopt something like that. We considered a specific number of positions that had to be filled with people with disabilities, like special appointments, not state civil service, since that's part of the merit process. So lots of conversations like that on what we could do to get more people with disabilities into state service. But we're always looking for new ideas, suggestions. And I do want to mention one thing, Susan, just because you talked about giving us ideas and the fact that we are looking for ideas from everyone and we're always open to that. One thing that I do have to say in looking at the idea, the suggestions and recommendations and feedback that we just received recently, we had a lot of different perspectives and some of those conflicted with each other. And so that's always been a challenge for us. We had a couple of years where promoting LEAP, getting more LEAP exams. I mean, we literally went from maybe 10 LEAP exams to almost 50 in less than 2 years after, 30 years of only having a handful, because that was what we were asked to do. That was what the focus was. They wanted us to provide more classifications, make those more readily available. We completely revamped the qualification piece of that, like I said, with the readiness evaluation. However, some of the feedback we've been getting recently that we were referring to actually indicates that some people with disabilities feel like they're being pushed towards LEAP. And that's what they got from our website. And they don't want to be pushed towards LEAP. They want to just be given the two options. And I think that's why Jerry kept using the word option, because as we've talked about that in the office, just as recently as this week, as we've been looking at all of this information and how we could use it, it's a different approach. So, like I said,
person with a disability, I got all my jobs by just persisting and pursuing,
right,
and working through it.
Yes,
I didn't. It's hard if you think that you have to get the LEAP. I totally understand.
Yes.
I also totally understand what you're saying about the different perspectives. I mean, disability is not it's not a monolith. It's not one way.
Right.
There's a lot of different perspectives, and they're needed different perspectives. Of course, as a part of the activist community, I'm always concerned about nothing about us without us. So I think the idea is that DACs are supposed to help communicate the various perspectives and roll it up into one perspective, but that's a hard goal. It's always a hard goal, is how do you get it? How do you get it in the simplest form that's useful instead of your the millions of different thoughts? I do want to give a chance because other people have questions, and we can keep talking probably forever on this, Glenna, you and me, Jerry. But let's pull in Mindy. Mindy has two questions in the comment. One is LEAP in any of the annual mandatory all staff trainings? Is it required?
Oh, I did see that question, Glenna, if I may.
Oh, sure.
Yes. So we have the privilege of being in collaboration with the statewide training unit, the Workforce Development Division at CalHR, and happy to report that in the supervisory training, I'm blanking on the exact name of that training, supervisory, managerial, executive, there is information about LEAP, and I'm not articulating it very well, but the answer is yes.
And I would just add to that for us, we have new employee orientation for all of our employees, and we include all of our program information from OCR in that onboarding new employee orientation. But each department is required to have a LEAP coordinator. And so the LEAP coordinator should really be working on whether their onboarding and new employee orientation information is inclusive of all of the LEAP information. So that is something certainly we could continue to talk to our LEAP coordinators about it. We have several tools available for them and checklists so that they know what their role is. But each department is responsible for kind of promoting that within as far as the staff trainings.
So then the next question from Mindy was, how do classifications get on the radar of the workforce analysis group?
I'm not sure what that question means. The workforce analysis group reviews all of the classifications in the state of California. So we look at, we have occupational breakdowns that go through several layers, and they're reviewing all of the occupations for each department. So
I see Mindy nodding, and I think that's the answer then, correct?
Okay,
right?
good.
Yeah,
Perfect.
it's there, you do all of them. Okay, then
Yes.
The next question is, are hiring managers required to pull a LEAP candidate list for open positions? For open positions.
So if I understand the question correctly, and sorry, Glenn, I'm just jumping right in here.
No, please do.
When units or hiring managers go to pull the eligible list, LEAP candidate eligible names are automatically provided. There's more detail beyond that. I understand it can be adjusted and that those hiring units can request a LEAP only list as well.
So just to add to that, and I'm just going to be honest, as a hiring manager who's been hiring for, more than 20 years, I've never pulled a list as a hiring manager, right? That happens in my HR shop, regardless of what department I've worked at. So I know it's not just me or just one department. I've never seen a list. And so the list that the HR shops use to send contact letters or to review eligibility, I've never seen that. If there are supervisors and managers out there that are pulling that and looking at it, I honestly can't speak to what they even do with it, because that is not a process that I'm familiar with. And every time I've mentioned that, like I am now in meetings and things, because there's always talk of this LEAP list that managers pull, I feel like we're talking about something that may have happened 20 or 30 years ago, but is not really part of everyday hiring practices now. But to emphasize Jerry's answer, the list that is used to whether it's to send contact letters from HR or whether it's to review eligibility, absolutely it includes all of the LEAP candidates. They're all merged together. The LEAP candidates are in rank 1, and there's no indication of who's LEAP and who's not. So for people who were worried about managers seeing that list and knowing that some were LEAP and some were not, that does not happen as far as the list, the visual of the list. Everyone looks the same. There's no indication they're LEAP. But again, I don't know what managers are pulling lists out there. So certainly our personnel management division, our exam division, we do have divisions with more expertise in how all of that HR part of it works. But I just wanted to kind of get that out there, because it's always, that question comes up all the time. And I don't really understand what departments are having their managers pull lists and look at the people on there and what they're doing with that. But that, again, that could be just me.
I want to open it up. We don't have any more questions in the comments. Would anybody like to unmute and ask a question? We have wonderful resources here that can answer your questions about these processes. Bobby, did you want to jump in really quickly?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Susan. You're doing such a great job, and the guests are spectacular. I mean, you guys offered so much information, and this is one reason why we invited you back, because we had a lot of interest from the last presentation that you did that we didn't have time to get an answer. So thank you. And also, I want to commend you on the great job that you guys have done in expanding the LEAP programs. Like you said, in 20 years, you only had a handful. And suddenly, within the last year and a half that I've been watching, it has grown exceptional amounts. So keep doing great work. Someday, I hope to see that all of our positions are eligible for LEAP exam. So keep up the good work. Question.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome. Question I have for you is a couple of things. One, I want to follow up on Mindy's question that she presented earlier. And Jerry answered by stating that, yeah, we have a mandatory supervisory training where the managers receive some training on LEAP. Now, is that happening just because there is a mandatory training requirement as soon as you become a supervisor, you're required to take one. And then you have continual training on an ongoing basis. So is that training just offered one time when they have that mandatory training in LEAP, or is it ongoing on a mandatory basis?
Glenna, if I may, I do
Yeah, go ahead.
believe, well, so just to back up, historically, in the manager and supervisor training, I apologize, I'm blanking on the exact name of that training. LEAP information and reasonable accommodation was included. And now that training program has been modernized, it's even further enhanced. And yes, is definitely a part of the program.
Great. Thank you. And the other question I had previously, or when you started, you talked about the disability parity. And I think that's what, 16.6% or so of the workforce population in any state entity must be person with disabilities. Is that what we are talking about?
Want me to do that? Take that one, Jerry?
Well, I'm happy to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Glenna, that the parity figure is 16.6%, and departments below that are striving to meet that, certainly. And if they fall below 80% of that, that's 13.3%. That is the trigger that requires departments to set the goals and timetables.
And just to clarify, because of the specific words Bobby used with required, while departments are asked to do that, they often don't meet that goal, as we know. I'm sure I don't have to say that, right? That's why we have the goal setting process and why we check on it. And so just because we say departments are required to meet it, and that parity number is, it was calculated a very long time ago. It has changed over the years, has not been recalculated for a long time, but the 16.6 is the highest that it's ever been. And it's based on the labor force outside of state service. And so we're comparing, we're trying to meet what the rest of the labor force, California labor force, has represented, just as a point of reference, because we should be reflecting the community that we serve, right, in state service. And so while we say it's required, some departments really do struggle to meet that number sometimes. And again, here I go speaking for myself again at the Department of State Hospitals, because we had a lot, almost every job was so physically demanding, thousands and thousands of jobs where people were hurt every day on the job. It was very difficult to hire people with disabilities in those types of jobs. Also, we served sexually violent predators, and it was hard to hire people at all in places like that. So there are lots of recruitment challenges that departments have, that sometimes they've tried everything that they can, and they're still not quite reaching parity. And that's what we do at CalHR, is we look at it to see if they're making that effort, because there are plenty of departments that don't do much to make the effort, and we really, want to focus on them. And then for those departments that really try to...
I'm going to jump in here. Question, Bobby, is part of what I'm hearing you asking is, what does that mean, that term parity? Because it's a term we throw around and we know what it means for those of us that have researched it, but it's kind of like, why do we care about it?
It's a goal.
What does that mean? But it's kind of like me. Is that right? Yes. It's a goal.
Go ahead.
Is that right?
Yeah, I was going to let Jerry elaborate. It looked like you were going to say something, Jerry.
Certainly. Well, so bringing humbleness here, and also at the same time, historical knowledge, having been in the office quite a while, it's my understanding when the parity figure was established, it was based on the percentage of working age adults in the community. So people available for work who happen to have disabilities in the state of California, that number was established 16.6%. And just thank you to ACSED, who that organization had a different name at the time. I am aware that that organization and the Department of Finance put a lot of work into it and did a focused effort to come up with that number.
So Jerry, is it correct that the term parity means our goal of how many persons with a disability we have working in state service, the percentage of the total, right? Is that what you guys are saying?
I believe, yes.
The term parity means, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear a couple of words there, but it just sort of in basic terms that if the state of California reaches, overall 16.6%, that is about the level, even with the population in the state of California, again, adults with disabilities, working age. I do believe there's a non-civilian component to that, but now I'm really getting off into the deep end.
Okay. Bobby, did we answer your question?
Just to follow up to that. And Glenna, you clarified that, when I mentioned it's a requirement, but it's a goal, and everybody is trying to meet that goal. You asked 13 questions specifically to these state departments that are not meeting the goal and what have you. What do you do if they don't continuously failing to meet the goal? Is there an enforcement component to it? Is there a corrective action plan? Is there a follow-up? What exactly happens?
I knew I was not going to get out of that one. That is the most important question, if you ask me. And Jerry knows because I harp on this all the time in the office. There has not historically been any consequences or follow-up as far as publicizing who meets it, who doesn't meet it. I mean, the numbers are all published in our census, so certainly anyone could see that. But as far as what we do about it, that has not been something that's had a lot of focus. One of the reasons for that is because our program is so small. We have one person for every single program. So all those programs I mentioned, in addition to me, we have one manager. So Jerry's the manager for LEAP. Kyra is the manager for workforce analysis. John is for language services. Eli is for RA and EEO. And so as the process works with workforce analysis, Kyra is collecting, the 140 or so different department workforce analysis with tons of data in it every year that's being put in our in our system. With every department has their own dashboard that they log into, and it's not just disabilities. We have upward mobility requirements, and then of course we have all of our other demographics that they're trying to meet. And so that is a ton of data that's coming into our office that one person calculates in order to provide the overall census every year, which you can find on our website. And it's now, I think, up to a couple hundred pages with all of the tables. And it shows all of the occupations, the ethnicity breakdown, people with disabilities. We've now added veterans. And then we have a section that also talks about upward mobility requirements. That's all part of the workforce analysis that departments have to submit every single year. So usually, even though it's due June 1st, by August, we still have sometimes 30% of departments haven't turned it in yet for a variety of reasons. And so we spend the whole summer tracking that information down, trying to get it so we'll have adequate information and total information for that census report, which goes to the governor's office and then is later published on and the legislature, and then is later published on our website. And so one of the things I noticed when I got to CalHR in 2015 is that that's just a cycle that continually happens, but then there's not very much that's done with the outcome of that information, right? Because Kyra jumps right back in, collecting it, doing the report, and so what we've done just recently is Kyra and I got together with our EEO manager as well. And I asked them to come up with a tool for monitoring the departments and what their efforts are. So something that would be after the fact, we get the numbers and then we review the departments that need to do more work, right? And we're assuming that maybe we can help them. Maybe they need some help and that's why they're not meeting those goals. And so that's where CalHR wants to be able to jump in and talk with them, find out what efforts they're making. What obstacles do they have? Is it that they don't have any resources? And that's why maybe they haven't had a LEAP coordinator in 3 years. So their LEAP program is dwindling. And so those conversations have never really happened because there are no resources for it. So just recently, as part of the California Leads task forces, I'm not sure if anyone's heard of those, but the governor had a very large California Leads task force, and it was dedicated to diversity and sexual harassment prevention. And there were dozens of subgroups, including one for people with disabilities. And if anyone knows Joe Xavier at Department of Rehabilitation, he was our chairperson for the diversity task force. So we had some really good leadership, and we had all the task forces broken down, whether they were LGBTQ, veterans, the pay gap. I mean, there were just so many of them, including a very large one related to disabilities. And as a result of that California Leads effort, CalHR is requesting more resources because that effort kind of brought to light some of these exact things, right? I mean, I could say it for years. I need more staff so that we can follow up. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, there's room in the budget to give us, more for that. And so I'm really thankful that the California Leads Task Force has helped to bring a lot of these different things to light, including new things that we're working on. And so we have asked for resources that we are very, very crossing our fingers, hoping to get, and I'm thinking positively that we will, so that I could have at least one, maybe two more positions dedicated to following up on not only disability goals, but our upward mobility program. That's the other.
Glenna, this is such good information. I love hearing you talk about the back end process of this, that there are discussions that we haven't heard about. I didn't know about the Leads task force. Bobby, we have a list of questions. Did you get your?
Let's go forward and ask these questions. I know that we're running a little short of time, although we do have a few more minutes. So let's go ahead and present those questions. Will you read those, please?
Yeah, yes, I will. Absolutely. So, Glenna, the next question is a hot topic. This we hear this a lot about the timeliness of reasonable. Jessica asked, Glenna, is there a guidance on the reasonable accommodation process policy you've released about how long it can take before an employee hears back about an RA?
That is a great question. It's so exciting talking about these things, especially reasonable accommodation, because that's a very, very strong interest of mine over the last
years back about
years.
An RA. The follow-up is.
So because there's not statutorily a requirement for a specific time frame for an RA, that makes it very challenging to, kind of set arbitrary timelines, because every reasonable accommodation is unique and different and must be evaluated individually. So what we say, and what I hope to relay in the CalHR statewide policy that goes out, is that a reasonable accommodation must always be moving. There must always be something happening. It should never be sitting. And so we've done a few things to ensure that they are expedited. We've worked with Cal PIA to remove the waiver processes that are required from them that take time when equipment's being ordered. We've had the departments appoint a RA procurement coordinator so that the people doing the ordering separate from the RA folks know that the RAs get priority for any equipment that needs to be ordered. They're not just wherever they are in line and come up in the queue. And we are talking with departments on a daily basis. We have quite a robust EEO program where we get emailed every single day with questions about reasonable accommodations and consultations, and we help walk people through those. And one of the things that we advise is that you acknowledge the reasonable accommodation as soon as possible, right? You might not be able to implement it as soon as possible. Or evaluate all of the information as soon as possible. But you should absolutely engage in the interactive process as soon as possible, letting the employee know that you've received it and what the next step is. And sometimes the next step is just having a conversation about what the needs are and elaborating on what that request was. Sometimes the next step is getting medical verification, which is a challenge in and of itself, depending on who the medical provider is and how quick they are to reply. So those are all the variables that are constantly coming up in reasonable accommodations that do determine the time. And so if a reasonable accommodation coordinator is always moving forward. In other words, they've requested information from the doctor and now they've given 2 weeks and they're waiting for that. And then they communicate that through the interactive process, which I can't emphasize enough how important that is. They communicate that to the employee. And there's lots of other ways to do it too. You can say to the employee, I wrote to your doctor, they're not responding. Would you like to take this letter to your doctor? You might have better luck. And so the interactive process can come up with all kinds of solutions and ways to keep it moving. There should never be a time in a reasonable accommodation where it's just sitting and nothing's happening. So you're either waiting for information from the employee, from the doctor, you have a time frame for that so that it's not just open-ended and you follow up on those time frames. These are all things that are really important to ensure that they're done timely. But without a statutorily required time frame, it makes it, because they're so unique, the timeframes do vary. And so those are some of the things that we've done to make sure that they are being done timely and, relay that to the departments in our statewide policy.
Thank you, Glenna. This is wonderful information. It's great to hear you guys are talking about telling people they should have.
And I'm so sorry I ramble because I love this stuff so much and I know I talk way too much.
No. Been trying to rudely interrupt you, like politely rudely interrupt you, because I'm like, we got to get to the next question. Yeah, oh my gosh, this is such a good choice. What I think we want to do is I want to get Jen in that's about follow up with you guys, and then Jerry, you come back to every meeting. Maybe we can send you some of these questions, and we can have another a quick follow up briefing to make sure all the questions get answered. Other ones as well.
If time allows, I have.
There's someone that.
Go ahead.
Well, if you don't mind, since I know we cut you short last time, if you have a little additional time, would you mind answering some of these questions? Because I don't want to, deprive people from the important questions that they have in mind. If that's okay with you, I don't know how you're set up with your time. Would that be all right?
Absolutely, it's fine. And I just want to throw out there that if there's ever something even more, like I know this was a little bit focused on LEAP, but if you would like another presentation that's focused on reasonable accommodation, we're happy to do that too.
I think that's a wonderful idea. Yeah.
Great.
Glenna, we should have your reasonable accommodation person give a presentation. Okay, the next question then in line is Davika asks, could that can be measured year by year?
I'm going to.
I know you guys.
I'm going to read that question again, Susan. For some reason your audio is cutting in.
Thank you, Bobby. You go ahead then.
I will read Davika Singh's question. Could we have a dashboard for accountability that is public?
Thank you, Bobby. You go ahead then.
Year by year. So again, could we have a dashboard for accountability that is public and can be measured year by year? That's your question.
Yes, that is a good question. We could have a dashboard that shows that. That question goes a little bit beyond my level of decision making because it starts to become a little bit political, if that's even the right word, because departments really. We want to partner with departments. We want to help them, right? We don't want things to be punitive if we can help it. And so that's our first goal, is to partner with them and try to assist them. Departments leadership, have different opinions about whether it's very helpful to kind of call them out, to the public with those types of things. And so without getting into all of the politics and details of that, that's something that absolutely it could be done, but whether or not that is the best way to accomplish the goal, I think is still in question by, the higher powers that be as to whether that's a good strategy.
Thank you.
I'm told my audio is
definitely is there anything Susan, you're speaking. Hold on just one second.
Audios. Go for it, Bobby.
Is there anything we can do to support your efforts in getting more resources? Perhaps we can submit letters of support if you are submitting a BCP or budget change proposal. So now you already have a fan who's willing to support you in getting more resources. Take advantage of it.
That is so awesome. We would appreciate any letters of support. Absolutely. We talk with our customers, our clients all the time at the departments. We want to serve them the best way that we can. We are right there with you with the things that you see or the things that we see, and there are just not enough hours in the day with the tiny unit that we have to cover every single thing, especially right now in the kind of after there's been a civil rights movement and there's all kinds of new issues related to COVID and reasonable and religious accommodations surrounding COVID. We have just been inundated with so much new stuff when it was very difficult to even keep some of the standard things going. So we would love anything that departments would do for support. And not just, to help us get resources, but just to tell us where your biggest needs are. Because sometimes when I'm making that pitch at a higher level and I'm saying, this is what departments need, it's just me saying it. I'm trying to represent departments based on all these meetings and everything that I hear, but departments having a voice would be even better, to say, we do need, better reasonable accommodation timelines, or, we do need accountability for people who don't meet their disability goals, those types of things. So anything that you would like to offer, we're willing to take. Thank you.
And I think the same party asked another question. I found the reasonable accommodation process without timeline leaves a disadvantage for the employees suffering with the disability. And I understand that, reasonable accommodation varies and there are a number of variables. But is there a way, what she's recommending is timeline, is there a way that you can recommend at least engage in interactive process within number of days?
We can consider putting that in the statewide policy, yes. And I will absolutely do that. I do believe what's in there already is very similar. I don't know if it's those exact words, like a certain number of days, but I will take that to heart and make sure that it's as clear as possible that needs to happen immediately.
I chair the DAC for California Department of Public Health. Recently, we made recommendation to our director to engage in interactive process within 5 days from receipt of the request. That was our recommendation. Whether or not that's going to happen, I don't know, but I'm just sharing that experience with you. And again, I think that, Susan, if your audio is back, you want to take over completing any questions?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfectly. Go ahead.
Okay. So actually, I think most of what we have left, so we already had the, is there anything, Jerry, go ahead. I think what we have left is
well, Susan, the last thing I heard you say clearly was, Jerry, go ahead. So I think I'll take it from there. And I didn't mean to step on whatever else you had to say there. Just a few points real quickly is that not to get in real deep, I think I went maybe too far earlier, but I might have misspoken about the how the parity number was established. And I said something about civilians. It did not include people in the military. I apologize. That's all I meant about that. And I appreciate all the positive comments the kudos that are said about CalHR and all the great things happening. I want to share the credit with many divisions in CalHR, many individual people. It's a very collaborative effort. Glenna, you might agree. So thank you for that. And let's see. Oh, I posted a link to the CalHR HR professionals page. And if you follow the civil rights link, I apologize, my words aren't coming very smoothly right now, but I posted that. And I want to mention that in the LEAP area is a brand new question and answer document that we hope will assist, especially the departments and the department LEAP coordinators out there. We're always happy to answer questions, but hopefully this will assist in efficiently operating the program and answering questions, especially if LEAP coordinators are new or experience a situation they haven't experienced previously. Mm-hmm.
Thank you both. It's been a phenomenal session. You've answered a lot of questions. And Glenna, I'm going to take advantage of your offer. I would invite you to come back and present on reasonable accommodation, both you and Jerry, if that's okay.
I'd love to. And Eli Madrano, who put in the chat there the link to our census, is our EEO manager, our statewide civil rights EEO manager, and works on reasonable accommodation with us. So we can make it a joint presentation with all of our experts.
Absolutely. More the merrier. So thank you very much and really appreciated your generosity with time. And again, happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thank you so much for having us.
Happy holidays. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.